Hi there, and welcome to the fourth podcast of the year for KV518. This is Mark Price speaking, and in today's podcast I'm going to be talking particularly about the assessment task for this module to give you a bit of guidance and help you think and plan for this particular task. I would suggest that as you look through this podcast, make some notes and then you can discuss this with your route leader at the forthcoming reflective practice session coming up on Saturday. So yes, and the PowerPoint itself is also on Student Central as well. If there are any outstanding questions after you've had the session on the Saturday and you've discussed it with your reflective practice tutor, you can always email me back and I'll do my best to answer those questions. Okay, here goes. Just to remind you then, and all the details about the specific requirements of the task are in the course handbook as well, in the module handbook as well. But the task for this particular assignment is slightly different from the reflective practice module that you did last year, in that we want you to undertake a project. And that project is a piece of research into a particular aspect of practice that interests you and that is particularly relevant to your work. So choose something you're interested in is the first thing I'd say, and choose something that's relevant to your own work role and to your setting. And then over the course of this semester, the intention is that you are able to investigate that particular aspect of practice. You can look at in what way policy frames or directs that work, whether there's any research into that area of practice, perhaps related to other settings, and also to examine the nature of that issue within your own practice, and to take what we call a critical view of that, asking the questions about why you do things the way you do, thinking about some of the ethics of those issues perhaps, thinking about what represents best practice, and particularly thinking about how you might develop the practice in your setting. You'll need to record a presentation then that you make back to others in your setting. And you'll see there from this slide there are 4 assessment criteria. I'm not going to go through those in particular detail now, although we will later on. But just to say that the intention is that you are making a presentation to other colleagues in your setting in what we hope will be a professional manner, that you're demonstrating your knowledge and you're engaging with your colleagues to both pass the information but also perhaps raise some issues for discussion as well within your presentation. The overall timing of the presentation is 20 minutes in total. So what we want you to hand in to us is a recording either on a DVD or a data stick of that 20-minute presentation. And that along with that presentation itself, the recording, you'll also hand in some other material which I'm going to refer to in a second. So the main bulk of this assignment is the presentation itself with some supporting material as well as some reflective practice recordings. And it's that package material, if you like, that gets submitted for assessment. For this assignment then, it's a physical hand-in assignment. It's not a turn-it-in submission. So you'll need to get your assignment in its total package, if you like, to us in the School of Education by 4:30 p.m. on Monday the 8th of May. Now just as on the Turnitin submission points, the Turnitin submission point closes precisely at that time, 4:30 p.m. So when you hand in your assignment, you need to get it into the office by 4:30 p.m. 4:31 p.m. then is a late submission. So please don't be late in handing it in. You can hand it in you can post them in, of course, but you'll need to then make sure you post it in advance so that it arrives with us by Monday the 8th of May. So Monday the 8th of May 2017, 4:30 p.m. is a hard copy submission. So we would recommend you put all the material that I'm going to outline now together in a wallet or in an envelope of some sort, one single collection material by that deadline, by 4:30 on Monday the 8th of May. So as well as the actual recording on a data stick or DVD, you'll also need to hand in with that 3 ordinary reflective journal recordings from across the year, illustrating your development and particularly focusing, we would expect at least a couple of those to be focusing on the development of your presentation task as well. But then the 4th reflective practice recording is perhaps a slightly extended one. We would anticipate this being approximately 1500 words, but there's not an exact word count on that. And that again takes the form of a summative reflection over the year. You don't then necessarily have to follow the format that we suggest for the ordinary reflective practice recordings. Don't forget also to hand in the 2 learning contracts as well, and if there are any other specific requirements, if there are any observations that you need to have had or anything like that, those should come in as well. And there will be also a final end of year reflective feedback from your workplace learning facilitator. But again, nearer the time, we'll give you a checklist to make sure you can check off for yourself that you've got all the material that's required. But basically, it's the recording, it's 3 ordinary reflective practice recordings plus an additional extended one, 2 learning contracts, and then any other materials that are relevant to your own particular route, including an end of year summary from your workplace learning facilitator. Let's look then at the actual project task in a bit more detail. First thing is to identify what your focus is going to be, and I've already said it should be something that's of interest to you, something that's relevant to you, something where it's a challenge for you and for your setting, so it's something that you want to kind of develop further, but also something that I always think it's important you choose something that you feel quite passionate about, because that's going to drive your interest, it's going to drive your commitment to kind of develop practice and develop the work of your setting. I would imagine you'll discuss this with your workplace learning facilitator because you want them on your side, but also your reflective practice tutor as well, and agreeing the focus for your task for this assignment is probably the main focus of your learning contract meeting that hopefully is coming up very soon. And the second learning contract then focuses particularly on this assignment task. The next thing, obviously following that, is for you to research that issue, to think about underpinning theory, and you might draw upon previous studies on that, to look at in what way local or national policy impacts on that area of practice, and to look elsewhere, look perhaps outside your own setting, other settings that may have developed that area of work in a particular way. Don't hold yourself back from perhaps visiting those settings or emailing them or finding out a bit more about them, so you can report that on. You can report back on others' work as well. And there may even be published research into that area as well, so you can look on the online library system for examples of research into the particular field that you're looking at. You'll need to think all along about, so in researching that, in exploring those issues, what are the implications then for you, your own practice and that of your setting. That's one of the key learning points you're going to be feeding back. And you're also going to be thinking about the overall process, how you've gone about doing the research project, the task that you've explored, and the implications for yourself, for children, young people, and for other adults. So, the presentation itself. Remember, we want you to be making some sort of presentation to a small group, say 6 to 8, not 2 or 3 and not 15 or 20, a small group. And by small group, the intention is that there's potential for some level of interaction and people to ask you questions. But the predominant element of your presentation is you talking, is you making that presentation. On the whole, if we're thinking about a 20-minute slot, we think 15 minutes of that is you talking and 5 minutes of that is for any questions or discussions. When you're making your presentation, if you can, focus particularly on your learning, what you've learnt from the process. And we recognise that making presentations of this nature is not something you'll be doing every day. And to begin with, you might particularly want to make notes. our guidance is that the presentations are much more you, where you're using notes rather than reading a script. But we recognise that some of you may find that an easier process. So if you can practice with abbreviated notes that you can refer to, and I would always recommend, if you can, you practice doing the presentation beforehand for timing. It's always a bit painful to listen to yourself speaking or watch yourself delivering a presentation of this nature. And I mean, I do this regularly, but I also still always feel a bit, blimey, is that my voice? Do I really sound like that? Do I really look like that? But if you can, record yourself doing a presentation so you can look back and learn from it and think about how you might either pace it slightly differently or phrase things slightly differently, or just get into the habit of speaking around something that hopefully you're interested in and that will be of interest to other people. Now, the kind of standard way, that, and you'll see from here, the way I'm doing it now is to use a PowerPoint presentation. You don't have to use a PowerPoint presentation, and in the past some people have used flip chart material or other visual material. I would really recommend, though, that you use some sort of visual stimuli as well as your spoken word, as it were. This is, as you'll appreciate, when we're learning, when we're receiving information, it's often good to be able to see things as well as hear things. So, and PowerPoint is the kind of the way that the default mechanism for doing this. Whatever you do, though, think very clearly about how you want to present your presentation visually. Try not to over-clutter slides or sheets that you're using, and think about how you might chunk material into specific headings or specific themes. If you're going to do any sort of activities with your group as part of the process, then fine, but watch out for how much time that then takes up. If, for example, you suggest to your group, okay, look at something and talk about it in pairs, for example, that actually takes up quite a lot of time. And remember, it's your input that we're interested in most. If you give out any sort of handouts, or there's any appendices that you want us to look at to support the project, that's fine. But don't throw in the kitchen sink, as it were. Only submit with your assignment things that are particularly relevant and that you refer to in your presentation. Don't just pad it out, if you like, with lots and lots of other pieces of paper. We'll only really be interested in anything that you refer to directly in your presentation. But please do include a list of all references in the same way that you would do for a written assignment. Either at the end of your presentation or as a separate sheet, give us a set of references, because that's always good academic practice. Okay, so on this slide you'll see 5 bullet points there. Incidentally, if you're thinking about, my last slide was about making sure you don't over-clutter things. I think generally speaking, 5 points like that on a single slide is plenty. Anyway, what I'm suggesting on this slide that you're looking at now, the structure that I've given you there, overall focus or issue and why that focus, research into theory, policy and practice, developing our own practice, in other words your practice and the practice of your setting, what emerged from your research, some reflection on the process and some analysis of what you're suggesting might be a way forward. And then your final kind of section to think about is what have you learnt specifically and how this might inform your future development. And that structure, those 5 bullet points that I've given you there, you might use that as a structure for your presentation. It doesn't have to follow that exactly, but I know many of you like having a kind of suggested structure for an essay or assignment, and so in a sense that's our suggested structure, those 5 areas for you to think about. Right, so let's just run through the assessment criteria as a whole. And remember, these are the things that we'll be assessing your work in its totality. All of the elements that you put in for this assignment, these are the 4 assessment criteria that we'll be looking for. So the first one, engage in constructive critique and development of your own practice in the workplace. So fundamentally, the presentation that you give is evidence of that. Have you engaged constructively in critiquing and developing your own practice in the workplace? Your practice recordings also support that process as well. So in a sense, we're looking at your presentation and we're using your practice recordings to support that evidence as well. The second of the assessment criteria, inform reflection through research and engage with debates informed by theory. So here we're looking specifically for the way, both in your presentation and in your reflective practice recordings, have you drawn upon theory, have you drawn upon research that help you in that analysis and help you in developing your view of your work. And don't forget to look at the place of policy within that process as well. So really that's about how you've drawn upon others' work to help develop your own thinking. The third bullet point there, the third criteria, effectively communicate ideas and findings to colleagues in a professional context. There, clearly, the presentation is the most substantial kind of source of evidence for that criteria. We're not expecting super high gloss presentations, and we're certainly not wanting you to spend so much time on the slides that you ignore the content. But we are hoping that you're able to show how you've researched a particular issue, and then how you've drawn out of your research the key points that you want to communicate to others in a professional context. And the nature of that professional context, if you like, is that it's to other colleagues, so other people that will have an understanding of the issues that you're talking about, that will have an understanding of your role. So, for instance, it's not you talking to your friends, and it's not really either you talking to parents. You're talking with other professionals. You're passing on and communicating your ideas and findings to other colleagues in a similar or related role and context to yours. And then the final bullet point there, demonstrate ability to reflect critically on learning. That, remember, draws particularly on both the presentation, but particularly on the recordings, and the way that over the course of this year, again, you continue to develop your own ability to reflect critically on your learning. So the way that you ask yourself specific questions and pose questions to others which supports their learning is a key aspect of that. And hopefully that assessment criteria won't come as a surprise to you, because in a sense that underpins that last assessment criteria there underpins the whole of this module. Okay, last slide then. So as part of your presentation, and perhaps particularly as part of your final recording of the year, the extended one, think about to what extent were you able to critique yours and others' practice. Have you taken that critical view of what's happening in your workplace? And by critiquing it, remember, you're kind of evaluating the impact of it, you're exploring the underpinning issues, and you're really exploring in what way are we meeting the needs of the children, young people, the parents, the communities that we work with. And also reflect on to what extent were you successful in presenting your ideas to others. Remember, you've kind of researched something, you've probably become the expert in that particular field in your setting. And one of the features of good professional practice is being able to pass on information and support other people's professional development. So if you can, think about how successful you were in communicating your ideas. And then of course, thinking back overall for the project itself and the presentation, what's been your key learning for that process? I've referred to this task in this presentation as a research project. You're researching other people's and your own practice, and those research skills will be picked up in year 3 and in year 4 of the course. So we're going to build on those skills over the next couple of years. The way that you read about other people's work, the way that you bring a questioning eye to that work, and that you reflect and develop your own practice. So these research skills that you're developing, we're going to continue to build on those, particularly in year 3 and in year 4. Okay, I hope this has been helpful and useful in kind of talking you through the presentation. Of course, you will have the support of your root leader as well as your reflective practice tutor. And the intention is that in your session on the forthcoming Saturday, you'll have some time with your root leader to reflect on preparing for this task, and then the support that you'll be receiving over the course of the term from your workplace learning facilitator and from your reflective practice tutor. If there are any queries though, do please email me back. You've got my email address, I'm sure, but it's m.price@brighton.ac.uk, and I hope to see you soon.